In other Nintendo news this week, a job listing suggests they may already be working on next-gen hardware development, and it looks like it would be for another handheld.
Yeah, that's the surprising part. We've talked about it for a long time. What do they do about Wii U?
Yeah.
They would make another console, and then now we're talking about another handheld with the new 3DS already coming out soon.
Exactly.
Yeah, it doesn't seem the 3DS is older, so they have to be. You know, like that cycle just.
Yeah, I guess that's true. I guess if they're hiring now, maybe they were thinking 2 years from now, they would release the new.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it was an interesting story. A lot of people flipped out about it, but like Nintendo is always making a new something, always. And I mean, I feel like the PlayStation 5 is in development right now.
Everybody's
like,
got something.
The Xbox One, 2 is in development.
The Xbox
right now.
One, 2.
Like, there's new PCs coming out.
With the 1-2 punch.
Yeah, so I mean, it just feels like there's always something.
Do you really think that's true? Do you think they're working on the next Xbox right now?
Yeah,
Yes.
100%.
Yeah.
That's just crazy, right? It's like 7 or 8 years from now it'll be done. Like,
Well, I mean, I don't think it's like 1,000 people in a
Yeah,
room,
I
but
know,
I'm sure
I
there's
know.
like
Just
there's
like a-
20 guys where they're just like your job is to think about what we do after this. Like, so it's not
crazy to
just
be
like,
one of those few people that this is your job to
Yeah.
plan what hardware is going to be released almost a decade from now.
Yeah. We what's the Sony, the guy that's in charge of the PS4 hardware?
Sean Lade?
Cerny.
Yeah, Cerny. He was hired by Sony in 2000 and I'm totally gonna get the year wrong, but it was like years before anybody even thought that they were thinking about the PS4.
Yeah.
And that was his job, was to like have the vision and like shepherd that process. So, you know, just because they're hiring someone today, like, yeah, I'm glad that we covered the news and it's interesting to talk about, but I don't anticipate it to mean anything until 2017.
Granted, I think with Nintendo it's a little different. With the other consoles, I feel like they adapt and grow a lot differently than the consoles like we played growing up. Like when you got an NES, that was your NES until it broke, and then they made
but they never broke.
Yeah, they never and then they made like the top-loading one, you know, and then there was a Super NES, and that was it until the N64. But nowadays there's the PS4, and then there's a new, like if you look at what the Xbox 360 looked like at launch,
as compared to
like
today.
with the blades and stuff like that, versus like the one that was there at the end.
It's insane to look at the Xbox 360's launch dashboard.
Yeah.
Like I used it. I used it every day for years, and I barely recognize it.
So I think that like
There were no ads on
I think a lot of development now is put into the growth of these things and watching them adapt throughout time. But yeah, I feel like Nintendo is sort of always tinkering at something, and they're different than the other guys because they do put out a new hardware revision like every 2 years or so. Yeah. Like they're going after that. You know,
well, they do now. That's become sort of their thing.
Yeah.
At least in the handheld side.
Yeah, they're going after that. You know, on the iPhone, you can pretty much say, well, they added 5 new things this year, and people are like, cool.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
I guess they've always. All Nintendo handhelds have been like that. Like the Game Boy was the Game Boy Color, the Game Boy Pocket, and then the Game Boy Color, and obviously the DS, the original DS, was not a good-looking system. But then the DS Lite was incredible.
The original DS is really bad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The giant clamshell.
The interesting thing about this job listing is that it's in America.
Yeah.
It's not in Japan, and so that's the part that really throws me for a loop. Like I don't understand that.
You would assume most of their hardware development happens in Japan.
Yeah. That's the portion of this that makes me sort of like. Like I feel like we're missing a piece of the puzzle.
We had Perrin Kaplan in the office recently who did
old PR.
Yeah, old PR for Nintendo, and she talked a lot about how she worked there when like the DS and the Wii came in, and it was basically like they'd get a phone call and they'd go to Kyoto and they'd be like, here's this new thing, and they'd go hands-on with it for the first time, and they'd have to like sort of bring that message back to America. And she talked about over the last few years, those walls have kind of been chipping away, and it was less like it was in the 80s and 90s where Japan would be like, we have a thing and that's what we're doing, and America would be like, okay, so I guess we're doing this new thing where you move your hand in front of the TV. So I think that like it's getting closer now, and it's kind of cool to see that.
But it's
the
still,
Wii, the hot new toy where you move your hand
in front of the thing.
Nintendo of America definitely doesn't call the shots, though, right?
Yeah.
Like Nintendo of Japan gets to choose what direction this company is going in, and then Nintendo of America has to just be like, all right.
And Reggie just says, my body's ready, and they go.
Like, weren't you saying, like, a lot of the decisions that seem a little bit strange in America make more sense? Like, you went to Japan, and what were you saying about the 3DS? Well, first of all, they're everywhere.
Yeah, they're everywhere.
So even Street Pass makes more sense because.
Oh yeah, Street Pass was amazing in Japan.
But weren't you? Couldn't you like pay for things with the 3DS?
Well, I mean, so there's the Suica cards, which is basically your Metro card in Japan, and you can use them to buy things from the vending machine, or you can touch it to your Wii U and buy games. Like that's a new thing.
Oh, that's really weird.
They just started
I didn't know
implementing that.
That's
Like
awesome.
over like where the Amiibo sensor is. You just slap your credit card down.
So we have that. I don't know if
That's
it's
what
RFID or like what the actual tech is, but like we have this thing that in America you're like, oh, what's the point of this? But
Yeah.
then like once you're in Japan, you're like, oh, like there's this whole other portion of the world using this technology.
And
that
I think like the whole clamshell design of handhelds there makes more sense because there's a lot of people just like jumping on a train, closing it up, throwing it in a thing, and just getting on their way. Whereas on the Vita, it's like you need like a case or a man purse for it. Like you always have to worry about that screen on the front. So it's also like a bigger system. It's just nicer. Everything's more compact.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm excited for their new hardware. I'm always excited for the new hardware. I think that like people will forever be angry that their systems aren't as powerful as the rest. I think there was even like a line in this news story about the
Low power.
the
It's
person.
for they want to have low power design experience would be a plus.
Yeah, so that's interesting to
They
me.
have
I think
experience
that
working on low power devices.
I think they're just not
Like a
interested in that arms
What?
race.
Like a flashlight.
Yeah.
I was gonna say like those old video game watches.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Like that had arcade
Mr.
games
Game
on them.
Game and Watch. Yeah, I don't think they're interested in that graphics arm race like everybody else is. I think like they are a toy company. Like they want to make games first. Hardware is basically just a vehicle they use to make their games, and we'll see if that pays off.
Yeah.